maybe like Ghatak was like, any film cineast subcultures in India, during the 70s and 80s. There were these, very divisions, like between Ray group and Ghatak group and all that. There's all over. It's a pan-Indian phenomenon. You have these people who supported Ray, people who supported Ghatak and all that. So that was there in Kerala also. You can find a lot of people who supported or who loved Ray, and those who loved Ghatak. There may be many reasons why. One interesting reason which you said is also very relevant, in the sense this loss of home. What is home, and the endless search for home is something that is very Malayali in a sense, because we are a kind of diasporic people. We have always gone out. So maybe home, coming back home, the search for home may be one theme that could have, attracted Malayali audience to Ghatak. Another could be like, if you look at the way in which many of the writings about Ghatak has been done in Malayalam. Because one thing was like, there was this kind of, if you look at the 70s and 80s, there was this pro-left radical movements in literature, film, theatre and all that. So that actually, aligned more with the Ghatak sort of, vision and, thing like that. Third thing could be like his way of life, his anarchic. That really was, again, John was another icon, was made into icon for more than his films. He is celebrated as a kind of anarchic, kind of nomadic kind of person. So there are many reasons why Ghatak was, celebrated in Kerala. And much has been written about, but when I look back, there is also a lot of, difficulty in entering into Ghatak's works as such. Unlike Ray or Sen, who were much more, we could actually relate to them in many ways. Like, for instance, Sen and his, whole, his narrative styles or his concerns, his class approach, and all this was very much at home for Kerala. Ray, because if you look at the history of Malayalam translations, you can see almost all the works of Tagore, Vimal Mitra, Tarashankar Banerjee, Manik Bandyopadhyay, all these have been translated into Malayalam. So we're very much at home with that milieu which Ray was trying to talk about. Or his films are set in that kind of milieu, which is we were very close to that. So we could immediately relate to that. But Ghatak was different. For instance, how do you watch a film like Dash? Very, very difficult to enter it. For instance, how do you watch a film like Komal Gandhar? I found it very difficult in the sense, though we also had KPAC, a kind of, IPTA, an offshoot of IPTA thing. The kind of subtextual references that Ghatak is bringing into his films is very, very difficult for a Malayali to enter into. Like, he's bringing into, play a lot of references to his own plays, like Dalal, all those kinds of plays are being reenacted in the film, which we have no clue about actually. And also the kind of references that he brings into a lot of other kinds of traditions, which are not classical in that sense, it's not pan-Indian in that sense. You have a lot of tribal, folk, and different kinds of tunes, and that is very, very difficult to enter into. Thirdly, subtitles were very poor. Like, subtitles doesn't actually give an entry.
And the prints as well.
Yeah. So that was what made Ghatak a very difficult person to emulate, in a sense. Maybe his life, not his films.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that we've been sort of discussing outside of the book and outside of these conversations is Ghatak's, the prints have not been, people have not been kind to his prints. The subtitles were always poor. But now good subtitles are happening. I mean, there are various important people like, Scorsese's Foundation, as well as the British Film Institute, Criterion, our own National Film Archives of India. They're all working towards restoring his films and improving the quality of the subtitles, which should definitely help because, when I watch these films, I don't care about the subtitles, but I was just sitting here and reading, and people who don't understand have no idea what's being said.
That song to be subtitled. It's very interesting lyrics to that. Lines are very interesting. About Kolkata.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of sums up the film as well. The song itself, the words of the song, Fellow Chaudhry's words, sum up the. But that's one of the good things that's been happening with Ritwik Ghatak's films now, finally, after all these years, 50 years after his death. 6th February is his death anniversary, his 50th death anniversary, and of course November was his 100th birth anniversary. But yeah, CS, what do you want to
No, again, one more,
talk about?
like for instance, the way in which Ghatak has to be, I would say this century is Ghatak century, We are entering into Ghatak century in that sense. If you look at, for instance, I would like to, quote a scene from Ghatak, from Chukita Por Gapo. The last scene is very, very interesting. In the sense, in the last scene, he's being shot at the Naxalite den. And when he falls down, he actually pours his arak onto the lens. Then he actually, before that, he says the world is burning, that Buddhist fire sermon chant he makes. Then he actually refers to a story by Manikda. He says, do you remember that story about Manikda? And he's only in the film, it's very difficult to understand which story he's actually referring to. But there is only one line about that character. Actually, that character, that scene, and because it is the last film of Ghatak, and the last scene, or is, I would say, is, departing words as it were. And that story is actually about a weaver in colonial times who refused to take loan and get into this debt trap. So what he does is he doesn't take loan, and he's actually out of, he can't weave. So one day somebody passes along his house at night, and there is a sound of the loom. So the person who passes by enters the room and looks at it. He says, where did he get the money to weave? So when he looks, he goes inside and look at him. He's actually weaving an empty loom. There's no thread, nothing. And he said, nobody can prevent me from doing this. I can still weave. So weaving is nothingness. Weaving without clothes.
So that sums up so many things.
That is what also Ghatak did. I would say, like he was actually, you would weave. So I think these kinds of nuances, these kinds of references, you don't get from subtitles. So for a non-Bengali, it would be very, very difficult to get this thing.
Yeah, I wonder if many Bengalis would have got it often as well, because not just this particular scene. This is, I suppose, fairly obvious, that he's talking about himself, but the reference to the Upanishads. How many of us actually know? I don't. How many of us have read so much of the old texts and scriptures to really know what he's referring to? You can actually appreciate it on one level, which is the obvious level, but there are multiple other levels that you can only know with that education. I think and at some level it's fair not to have time for Ghatak then, no? Because how would you expect me to read 50 thick books, understand so many things, know about partition, feel these things, feel those things, and then come to watch your film? That's expecting a bit too much from your audience as well. And perhaps the reason why people didn't take to him. The other thing I think is, at the time he was making the films, partition was still very raw to Bengalis. And perhaps you just didn't want to know about, you knew about it already, and you didn't have time for it anymore, about having to go to a theater and watch a film about your life pretty much, which you'd already experienced. It had scarred you forever and subsequent generations forever as well. And, do I also have time to go and watch a film on that when I'm trying to make a living, trying to find home, and so on and so forth? That might be part of the reason for his failure. Yeah, what do you make of that?
Yeah, that must be. Like, one more thing, before that, I would like to ask you, when you did this book, it's a very interesting book in many ways, in the sense that it is a kind of book that has not happened before, because we have very few books on Ghatak, Haimandeep Banerjee, and also one by Ashish Rajadhyaksha, and
in English,
Ahmed Gandhar,
in English, too many,
and and it is almost 50 years since he died. So what were your experiences of actually, did you stumble upon very unexpected kind of information, kind of insights into, because I found many of these essays and reminiscences by the actors and those who worked with him, that is coming out for the first time in English. I think we have never had a chance to actually
that's true.
Read about that aspect of his life.
True. Yes, I discovered him in many ways. So I was very fascinated about his cinema, and I was curious about him as a person, yes, of course, but not much more. I'd read a few books, I'd read things, but while looking for things, obviously you discover much more. Safdar's essay that I read out was one of them. But there's so much more, and you discover that perhaps because of the Communist Party government in West Bengal for the longest time since his death, various magazines, there's a culture of little magazines in Bengal, have at times brought out these special issues, and they've approached people who worked with him and taken those interviews, and he himself had a couple of books, and I now have about 25 books on Ghatak, all in Bangla, written by various people over the years, which have essays, which they were happy for me to use in this. So that, he was always written about. Whether people liked his films or didn't watch his films, he was always an intriguing person to many people. And he continues to be. So I suppose that's part of the reason why, and I suppose there was a bit of the, it was also controversial in terms of the family life, the alcoholism. It was almost like, Devdas-like character, whatever you might want to think about it. That he was a very filmy character. You could make a film about him, which somebody did recently in Bengal. I'm not a very major fan of that film, but I can see how he was someone who you could make a film about, simply because of all the drama in his life, melodrama, whatever you want to call it. So he had a very dramatic life. He was obviously a fascinating person with very strong views. He read tremendously. He knew a lot about a lot of things, and wasn't scared of saying what he knew. Of just being a nuisance at times, and was therefore chased out of various groups.
Yeah,
and various
that phase in Juki Tapu,
It's
an argument with everyone.
Exactly. And I'm still finding out things, yes, that the book is obviously out, but I'm just 2 days back, somebody forwarded me the scanned copy of another book that I hadn't accessed, which has essays by Mrinal Sen and various others. And I'm still discovering things about him, and which would seem odd after having published 50 essays, that, if this one sells, maybe there can be 50 more essays. I'm not proposing it to anyone, but, that there's just so much material on him. And I would have thought that after doing the book, I just move on to something else. But I'm still working on Ghatak, with a couple of other people, doing a couple of translations and so on, because more publications are coming out. And, people have sort of asked me to chip in here and there. And each time I do, I find out more things.
Yeah, I think one sad thing about Indian film studies is that, there are no good translations. Actually, much intelligent, interesting, insightful things are actually written in the vernacular. Like in Malayalam, you have a lot of writings on Bengali cinema as such, and likewise in Tamil or Kannada or all over India.
Absolutely.
But we never get to read that.
Yeah.
Only that we get to read only very few translated works, and also that's written in English, which I think is a bit unfair to Indian film studies itself.
Yeah, I suppose Ray must be the only one who's been written about, and who himself has written about extensively in English, and that's understandable. He was a global filmmaker in every way. Perhaps India's only real global filmmaker, certainly then, and that's justified, of course. And he was good with his English, and he could write himself and speak very well, and all of those things, which perhaps contributed to him being a global filmmaker. But the rest, I haven't read anything really, really good on John Abraham. I mean, I've read a little bit, and many others, and that's so unfortunate. And not just in cinema. That's a problem with the world. And we were talking about it some days back. Actually, I'm sorry, just to go on. That the recent trend of fantastic translations into English, I know primarily about Bangla, but from so many other languages. Banu Mushtaq is, obviously the big thing right now, and so many others that have just, excellent Indian vernacular literature that's being translated now in a big way, almost like an industry. That wasn't the case earlier, is such a welcome phenomenon.
And also, I think one interesting homage to Ghatak would be this Meghnad film on Ajandrik, where he recreates this Ajandrik journey.
People about it. You should tell people
I think we'll try and screen that film. Meghnad has made a film on the journey of Ajandrik, the journey that, what is his name of the character?
Bimal is the main character
that he makes, and they go to all the places.
Bimal and Jagatal, the taxi.
Yeah, Jagatal. That journey is made by this document. It's a very interesting document. So we'll take some questions.
Yeah, sure. If any. Oh, hi.
Yeah, Shamya, congratulations and thank you so much
Nice
for
to see
this beautiful presentation. Yeah, I just wanted to, I mean, I know your long journey you have taken. Maybe 2, 3 years back when we started
We started
discussing
talking,
about,
yeah.
yeah, and now it comes to a position like you have documented script like, and this is something very beautiful. What I feel that on the 100th, birth anniversary of a filmmaker, you're documenting it, collecting various things, and it's something, it's creating something new in the history of Indian cinema, definitely, I hope. So this must be something, I think this book will be, a tribute to his works
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and one thing I just wanted to ask you, like when you started the journey like 2, 3 years back when we started discussing about it, is there been any particular reason for starting that book? Like I should, and I also wanted to add something because you are the one person the person who can look Ghatak from the family background because you're so much close to him because you are also, that. And as an outsider, like through his works, he is no more. So how was it? I just wanted to know that.
So 2, 3, 4, 5 years back, thank you. Firstly, thank you very much, Ramdas. But also 2, 3, 4 years back, when I started collecting material, it was not with the idea of a book. I was writing some articles on Ghatak. The idea of a book was actually never there, because as CS introduced me, I'm a sports journalist, and of course, I enjoy writing about cinema, but I'm not a cinema person. And Ghatak is a very formidable, sort of forbidding character. You don't just start writing about cinema and write about Ghatak. So that was never a plan. The plan came about absolutely in a very undramatic fashion when last year various members of the family were planning to thinking of ways to celebrate the centenary. So I felt that with everything I had already collected and everything I knew I could collect, it's something I could do. So it's as simple as that I had material, I was interested in the subject without any end goal. I didn't have a book in mind, but I just wanted to read about him. So it was all there and it fell into place. So that's basically it. And fortunately, quite a few publishers showed interest, perhaps because it was a centenary, and therefore the book is out. On the second part of your question, yes, I belong to the family, extended sort of family, but it doesn't really exist. He died before I was born. Some members of the family liked him, many didn't. Because, as we have discussed, he was a conflicting sort of person, and not easy to like at times, especially if he turned up drunk at people's weddings and so on and so forth. So lots of people didn't like him, understandably. And no, he's not somebody, of course you heard about him. His films were discussed when Tita Shakti Nodinam released in India for the first time in the early 90s. Everyone went to watch it, people talked about it in the family. But he was not someone that we discussed a lot. So yes, I'm an insider, and yes, that's why I could access certain essays that exist in the book from Mahashweta Devi and Aroma Datta and Pratiti Devi, his twin, and Nabarun Bhattacharya, the writer, and so on. So lots of that is there. Parambrata Chattopadhyay is also a relative. So that was an advantage I had as a family member. But I think I approached it, at least that's what I think, as a complete outsider, as just someone who was interested in doing this thing. And if I were not part of the family too, I think I would have managed it if I knew that these works existed, because anyone reaching out to these people and asking for permission to translate them could have done it. It happened to me, I happened to be a family person, but I think I dealt with it completely, because if I didn't, there were certain things I couldn't have included. And let me be very honest here, most people in the family don't like his wife, Shurma Ghatak. And I have a section called Ritwik and Shurma with 2 essays. And I was going to say, I don't think I could have done it. I know I couldn't have done it because people have told me that from the family, why did you include this, and so on and so forth. It's none of their business, it's my book. But those issues would have been there. I approached it as a complete outsider. I didn't have an opinion on Ritwik the person or Shurma the person or anything like that. He was a filmmaker and a very interesting person. So I think that distance helped what, to my mind, helped this book be what I think is a fairly satisfactory product.
Thank you so much, Mo and CS. Now, I just actually wanted to share something which is so uncanny. I was earlier today, I was at Aspinwall House. We are visiting the Kochi Biennale. And there's this one exhibit by the Panjeri Artists Union, which is a West Bengal-based collective. And on the wall over there, Shammo, they have a huge, an embroidered sort of a section of a line. And guess what the lines are? ওখানে দাঁড়িয়ে মনে হলো ওই রেল লাইনটি ছিল and the scene from Komul Gandhar, the iconic dialogue, and just imagine the coincidence that we are watching it today and suddenly he speaks out that line. And so if you have a chance to go and visit that exhibit, you'll see Ritwik Ghatak's lines immortalized in that painting, not in the painting, in that installation.
I hope to see more of, well, I hope is the wrong thing to say because you don't want the world being what it is, but the world being what it is, I'm sure the Biennale will have a lot of exhibits. I've just reached today a lot more on similar thoughts and subjects, unfortunately.
Thanks, Shamo. And growing up in Calcutta in the 80s, what you said is true, that we saw a lot of Ray films, but Ghatak was never there, I mean, except this children's film. And Ghatak was always at the periphery. I mean, you knew about his films, you heard about Shovanareka, you heard about Tita Ekti Nodin Naam, but we could never access his films. And what you said about you would get bootleg DVDs later, where the print was so bad that you couldn't sit through it. So I'm really happy that work is now being done to restore some of his movies. So maybe it's about time that we got to see more of Ghatak movies.
And especially because of Tita Shakti Nodin Naam, which even I, and I'm sure some others here who are familiar with Bangla, grew up in, maybe not too many people here who grew up in Kolkata, but you're familiar with Bangla, you know the language inside out, but Tita Shakti Nodin Naam is not in Bangla, it's in Bengal, it's in a dialect of what is now Bangladesh, East Pakistan earlier. And I couldn't understand it when I watched it the first time because it was a very strong dialect and the subtitles were terrible. But what's great, among many others who have been promoting Ghatak or whatever you want to call it, once Sir Martin Scorsese appears on video and says, this film, when I first watched it, it did this, the layers, this, that and the other, and his foundation, the World Cinema project, is restoring it and subtitling it. I'm sure the subtitling will be fantastic and the restoration will be fantastic as well. That gives it a new life. Scorsese, I mean, maybe you didn't need Scorsese to do it, but that he has gives that film and various other films, I'm sure, a new life, an afterlife, and that's spectacular, the work that BFI has done a couple of films, and academics-based Indian origin academics based abroad are chipping in with the subtitling, even with NFAI. And this afterlife of Ghatak is another story altogether.
Hello. Yes. I am Shilpi Rajan. My exhibition Jahanger Art Gallery में चलते हैं. अगर Bengal sculptor, other two gallery, first gallery Bengal artist. Red കൊടി ചുവന്ന കൊടികളെ നിറച്ചു വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ചുവന്ന കൊടികൾ അവിടെ ബംഗാളിൽ 2016 എക്സിബിഷൻ നടക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ എക്സിബിഷൻ നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. 2016 അവിടെ കമ്മ്യൂണിസം ഇല്ല എന്നുള്ളതിലാണ് ആൾ പറയുന്നത്. എന്നിട്ട് ബോംബെയിലെ ഒരു മലയാളി പാർട്ടി ഓഫീസിൽ നിന്ന് എന്നെ ഫോൺ ചെയ്തു. നിങ്ങളെന്താണ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. പറഞ്ഞു ഞാൻ എന്താ ചെയ്താൽ എൻ്റെ എക്സിബിഷൻ നടക്കണു. അപ്പോൾ അവിടെ കമ്മ്യൂണിസം ഇല്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അവിടെ കംപ്ലൈൻറ്റ് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. ഞാനാ ചെയ്തതെന്നാണ് അവർ ഇത്. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു അപ്പുറത്തുള്ളൊരു ബംഗാളി ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട്, അവരെ അത് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഭീഷണി അവരെ നിന്ന് എനിക്ക് കിട്ടി. അത് ഞാൻ ചോദിക്കുന്നത് 16 കമ്മ്യൂണിസം ബംഗാളിൽ ഇല്ലേ?
അല്ല, എനിക്ക് ചോദ്യം മനസ്സിലായി. 2014 കൽക്കട്ടയിൽ എക്സിബിഷൻ നടത്തുമ്പോഴാണോ?
അല്ല, ഞാൻ ബോംബെ ജഹംഗീറിൽ.
ബോംബെയിൽ നടത്തുമ്പോൾ
അവർ ജഹംഗീറിൽ തന്നെ എക്സിബിഷൻ നടത്തുന്നത്.
ആ മറ്റേ ബംഗാളി ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ്,
ബംഗാളി.
ആ,
അവരാണിത് കമ്മ്യൂണിസം കഴിഞ്ഞു മരിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുക എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളത് ആണ് എന്നെ വിളിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞത്.
ശരി.
അത് ബോംബെയിൽ.
No, you're saying like he was having an exhibition in Mumbai in 2016, and next to his gallery there was another Bengali artist, their exhibition, and they were saying communism is no longer there in Bengal. So he's asking whether 2016 it was true what they were saying.
Should I just tell you and you can translate? 2016 or 2026? Okay. It wasn't there. It was dying. It's probably died after that. There's no new ruler. Obviously, I'm giving the picture from Bengal over the last 10 years. And of course, the CPIM is nowhere. A lot of it is their own doing. A lot of it is just changing times. A lot of it is the situation West Bengal perhaps found itself in commercially, in terms of jobs, in terms of employment. But happily, at least to me, and I think someone like you, happily, I sense a bit of a revival. I might be wrong. It might be wishful thinking. But certain things I hear from Bengal, certain hints suggest that the CPIM might have found some fresh blood, some new leaders coming up the ranks. And 2016, when what you talked about was a time when the old guard had basically vanished, gone down, disappeared. There was no new set of leaders, but I feel, I get the impression that a new set of leaders are starting to emerge. Coupled with, obviously it's been all Trinamool Congress and BJP as a distant second for a long time. Now distant but fast growing second in West Bengal, which I suppose many of us are not happy about, and would perhaps be happier with a stronger CPIM in West Bengal, which unfortunately the last many elections, the CPIM has played perhaps a negative role, in the sense that people voting for CPM have basically not voted for the Trinamool Congress. Basically, the CPM has cut the votes of the Trinamool Congress and helped perhaps the BJP's entry into West Bengal, which is unfortunate, at least to me, and I think that's changing a little bit. I think the left, the CPIM, is getting a little stronger. I think it's going to be many years before they can even think of coming back to power. But they're a bit stronger than they used to be 10 years ago, which is nice to know.
Yeah, 2016 CPM അവിടെ ഇല്ല, ഓൾമോസ്റ്റ്. പുതിയ അതിൽ പഴയ വൃദ്ധരായിട്ടുള്ള നേതാക്കളുടെ സമയം കഴിഞ്ഞിരുന്നു, പുതിയ ആൾക്കാരും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. അപ്പോൾ മറ്റൊരു ഭരണം വന്നിരുന്നു. 2016 കമ്മ്യൂണിസ്റ്റിൻ്റെ സ്ഥിതി വളരെ പരിതാപകരമായിരുന്നു. അത് അദ്ദേഹം പിന്നീട് പറഞ്ഞു വെച്ചാൽ ഇപ്പോൾ ശരിക്കും കുറച്ചുകൂടി ഒരു CPM-ൻ്റെ ചില പുതിയ പ്രതീക്ഷകളുള്ള സമയമാണ്. ഭരണം അടുത്ത കാലത്ത് നിന്ന് കിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിലും അത് റിവൈവലിൻ്റെ ഒരു തിരിച്ചുവരവിൻ്റെ ഒരു പാതയിൽ ആണ്. അതിൻ്റെ തുടക്കങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ട്. ചെറുപ്പക്കാരായിട്ടുള്ള CPM പുതിയ ആൾക്കാർ മുന്നോട്ട് വരുന്നുണ്ട്. അവരൊരു പ്രതീക്ഷയ്ക്ക് വകയുണ്ടെന്നാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായം. Any more questions? We'll wind up. So thank you, Shamya, and thank you all for being here. So please buy the book if you have not already done it, and Shamya will sign it for you. So thank you, Shamya, for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Yeah.